Welcome to Dark Character Profiler. Take a deep dive into the background and personalities of villains from books, video games, manga, and comics. Psychological analysis of some of the most deviant and heinous characters of all time. Now, here's Fulcrum.
What if anger wasn't an emotion, but a map, a message, a monster? In this special 4-part series of Dark Character Profiler, we talk to author John Vines as we explore the savage psychology behind his book, The World is Angry, a chilling portrait of a killer who is not only committing acts of violence, but he's making a point. This isn't a psychological fiction for fiction's sake. This is a mirror, and it's cracked. Welcome to part 1.
Dark Character Profiler.
John, I appreciate you joining me on the show for an interview.
Oh, you're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. We've been talking now for a couple of weeks, getting ready for this this podcast, and I'm excited just to talk about the book and get into the different characters and whatever questions you may have. Hopefully, I can answer them.
Awesome. Well, first, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, John Vines. I'm originally from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. Grew up there, and I just came to Houston after spending the first 20 years or 25 years in North Carolina, and came to Houston because that's where I had a job, and I worked as a geologist in the oil and gas industry. But I've always had a passion for kind of writing, being creative, and I just never did it. And then I finally decided that I had some ideas and I wanted to try to start writing them down. So it kind of led to me just putting together this book. So it's kind of my background, I guess. Brief
Okay.
background.
Yeah. So that's kind of cool that you're like a geologist.
Yeah, one of the main characters in the story is a geologist. I mean, it's not directly related. I'm not trying to tell my story in the book, but I think when you're writing, you have to use the things you know about, especially when you're beginning to write. You kind of have to borrow the things that you know. So I was just borrowing certain things in my life and things that happen, and then trying to be creative and try to put some fiction behind it, I guess.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So without going into too much detail or any like spoiler territory, can
Yeah.
you tell us a little bit about The World is Angry?
Yeah. So I think I started off with this idea of three friends in this story, and I kind of had this hope, and hope is a big thing in my storytelling. But then whenever you're thinking of a story, just like you watch a show or any kind of story, you always think there's got to be conflict. So I started out with this kind of storytelling, kind of a classic storytelling about these three people and their lives and character development. But then I was like, well, that's not really going to grab people. So I always been fascinated by dark sides of human society. There's always kind of this side where you choose between good and evil, and then you justify that. So I decided that I'm going to have a serial killer because I like philosophy and I like sociology too. So I wanted this serial killer because to me, serial killers always have kind of they're really smart. They're not like people that just go out and just do random murder. They plan it and it becomes a part of them. So I said, well, I'm going to have these three characters, and then I'm going to have the tension part. The antagonist is going to be the serial killer, and he's going to be marking his killings in this story in a way that is frightening to society. He's using art to kind of portray his control on humans, if you will. But there's a twist, and the twist is this killer actually is linked to one of the protagonists. So it becomes kind of this story where it's not your serial killer that's just doing these random acts. He's actually got a plan, and it involves these three friends. And then it just kind of goes from there where there's just this running back and forth between the antagonists and the protagonists, and who's in control and who's like ultimately going to survive this kind of race between each other. So it's kind of like that. If I can't give away spoilers, I'm trying my best not to give away spoilers, but
Yeah.
it's kind of a very fast paced between these four people in their lives and trying to dive into their characters and what makes them who they are. And ultimately, it's just kind of that battle, if you will.
From what I've read so far, because I haven't finished the book yet, um, I I was trying really hard. I'm just a very
Yeah.
slow reader, unfortunately.
I'm a slow reader too.
But from what I've read so far, I'm like, wow, this story is intense. It's kind of nothing like I anything else that I've read really. So
Oh,
it's
thank you.
yeah, of course. I mean, it's really stuck out to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I try to get inside all my characters. So a part of me is like they say all characters in a book for an author are your children or your friends, I guess you can say. And I
Mhm.
try to put myself in their shoes. So I think a part of me when I was writing this story, and it wasn't like when I write, I kind of outline the story as a whole, and I
Mhm.
have the name of chapters, and then I say for each chapter, these are the kind of things I want to discuss, things I want to tackle. But it kind of evolves as you're writing, and you kind of have to go like, well, I wrote that, so now I really need to do this. I don't really have any other options. So I found myself being more inside the serial killer's mind as I was writing this story, and based on like how the world is and how we can justify things, and how I mean with serial killers, you can look at it like what's their motive? Is it control? Is it something that happened in their lives that made them who they are?
Mhm.
Is it just that they can like um it could be revenge. I mean, one serial killer I was kind of a book I read. It's called The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, and he goes over this killer during the Chicago World's Fair. I think it was 1874. His name was the killer was H. Holmes, but he was a con artist. So he was a serial killer, and he had this kind of he built this mansion at the World's Fair time, and it had gas chambers and all these like things inside his hotel, and he killed like over 20 or 30 people. But it's kind of like what made him do this. It was kind of like he conned people. His whole life was about conning people. It was very manipulative. So I think I was just trying to get inside that kind of mindset and like what makes someone do this. But in this story, I don't want to give it away, but there's a different motive what's driving this serial killer. He kind of has this addiction to the killing and he tries to turn it into art, but he also is doing it for another reason, which I won't give details to because it'll spoil it for the reader, right?
Right.
So I mean, it kind of comes. I kind of get simple. I mean, there's definitely people who are smarter than me with psychology degrees and who can say why people do things, serial killers. But for me, I always kind of come back to a basic love versus hate. Like, and there's a thin line between the two. Like when you hate someone, you can still love them, but you hate them so much that you love them so much that you also hate them because you can't get exactly what you want sometimes, I guess. So I was trying to explore this too, like how if you really love someone, you could just leave it alone. But if you really just love them so much that you can't get over it, you're obsessed with it. So there's kind of some ideas there about what's going on with some of the storylines. And each character has a story where they've had love in their life and it's lost and it's really haunted them, I guess. So it's just kind of a complex of introspection as the intensity of these characters are going against each other, right? So yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking about a lot when I was writing.
How long did it take you to write from the first spark of the idea to the last word and then subsequent publication?
Yeah. So I think I had this idea, like I said, three characters. I really want to explore three characters. And like I said, I was coming at it, I wasn't even coming at it with a psychological thriller at first. I was just these three characters. And I wanted that classic storytelling about like some person in a town and how they grew up and their life. And I came up with that idea maybe 2023, and I started writing and I wrote the first chapter and then I just put it down for like for like 4 or 5 months because I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do next.
Okay.
So then I kept on thinking about I need to have tension because every story there needs to be tension in a story. No one likes not having tension, and you got to overcome that. So then I just started thinking about, well, I like just started gravitating towards there's got to be an antagonist and who I want that to be. And I was like, well, I want to do a serial killer. And then it's kind of like, well, at that point, it's okay, what's this serial killer going to do? And how do you get in that mindset?
Mm-hmm.
So at that point, I started just writing, and like I told you before, I think it was for me for writing. I always wanted to write, but I was always scared of it because I didn't know if I could do it, and then I'd be frustrated. So I just started. At first, I just started saying like, okay, I need to write 100, 300 words a day, and just spend my time because I remember I read this interview once of Jerry Seinfeld, comedian. He says he puts aside 2 hours a day and he just sits somewhere and he puts his phone away, puts everything away. And if he doesn't write, he's still going to sit there for 2 hours. Because a lot of times I would do something and I would walk away and I'd be like, forget it. But you got to like, you think as a writer, you're just kind of inspiration and you just jump on it and you go with it. But it's like anything, like a job. You just got to put time in there, even if you're not going to do it. You just got to sit there and think. So I was trying to set aside a couple hours a day, and I said, okay, for me, word count 300 words or something like that. So from there, it just started flowing more. And I think at that point, once I picked it back up, the kind of I think it took me about 5 to 6 months to really put this book together. And at
Wow.
some days, I mean, my goal was to write, I was getting at a point where I could write 1 to 2,000 words a day. And towards the end, as the story's progressing, and I was kind of like doing my outline, saying, okay, this happened, this has to happen next, or this has to happen next, or I want this to happen next.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting it down to 4,000 words in a day towards the end because I knew how I wanted to conclude the book.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just me being able to get in that zone. And when I get in the zone, actually the words can come pretty easily. It's like rapid fire, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the whole process when I really wrote, I mean, the seed of the idea started to form 2023, and then it kind of 2024, the end. I think between the August through January of 2025 is where it just kind of everything came together. And then I tried to find agents, but it's pretty competitive out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I just went down the self-publishing route and used ADP publishing at that point, and kind of the book came out in April, a late April 2025. So yeah, that's kind of the steps, if you will.
I know you said you weren't thinking about writing a psychological thriller. You were
Yeah,
more so just thinking of writing a book about three characters and their lives and their friendship, kind of,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and then you said that there needed to be some tension. So, what made you decide on a serial killer?
There's certain moments in your life,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, these are just like things that just came to you. I mean, sometimes the ideas just come to you, and I don't know why, to be honest with you. But I started thinking about moments when, like, for example, when September 11th happened, I knew exactly where I was at that moment. When I was
Right.
a kid, and the shuttle explosion happened. So I was thinking about there are certain moments that captures everybody. And in this book, I did that. I mean, I had this serial killer, and he had this gruesome murder, and he did it in such a way that just seemed like, how the hell did he get away with that? And
Right. And it was kind of
that kind of hits,
shocking.
yeah, and it hits everybody, right? I think people, when they see things like that, they know exactly where they were in that moment. They can almost go back to that moment
Mm-hmm.
in time, and it's like very vivid. It's like a dream you wake up from, and it feels so real, but it's not. So I was like, that's the story. I think that's gonna. I wanted to explore that because I've had moments like that, and I wanted that to capture the reader just like it would capture anyone in real life.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, I was influenced by this character, this guy, this real life guy, H.
H.H.
Holmes
Holmes.
from, yeah, and I was just like, what made this guy do this? And he was a weird guy because for him there was a part of a sexual component. Like he got off on the killing. I mean, unfortunately, he killed a lot of women. And in my story, I didn't want to make this the serial killer that killed women. I didn't want to go down that route. That was just too creepy for me, I guess, in a certain way. I know that a lot of serial killers will probably angle themselves toward that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but I wanted this killer to be a little bit different in the fact that he had reasons, and he explains his reasons how he did what he did. He had his own
Right.
justifications, right?
Yeah.
And but they're not right. But I think as someone who's reading could be like, well, I see his angle. I wouldn't do what he did, but I get his logic, even though it's a twisted logic.
Right.
So it's like, I mean, with some serial killers, like for example, if you're addicted, like sometimes is he an addict or is he not an addict at what he's doing? Because I think if you look at some serial killers, I don't know all the serial killers from the history, but sometimes they're addicted to what they do, and it's like, how do you stop that? It's like if someone's
Right.
addicted to a drug or something, it's like there's ways to do that. There's ways to stop it, but how would you stop a serial killer who's addicted? Especially when they're really good at it and they
Mm.
can get away with it,
Right.
right?
Yeah, it's like the thrill of the fact that, oh, I did it once before and it was such a shocking thing and I got away with it. Let me do it again.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, and I think you feel bad. Like a lot of times when we do bad things and we get away with it, we feel really bad.
Right.
But but you might come back to it because it's like, oh, I like what I did when I did it, but I didn't like it after the aftertaste of it, if you will.
Right. That's
So
kind of reminiscent in my mind to, I want to say, Jeffrey Dahmer. He
yeah,
he didn't necessary so he wanted like intimate partner slaves.
yeah, okay,
um
yeah,
and he always ended up accidentally killing them and overdosing them on whatever the mix of drugs he was giving them. And so then he, had to kind of get rid of, if you know where I'm going.
yeah. I had to get rid of, you had to get rid of the evidence that he had.
Yes. So that part, if I'm remembering it correctly, from like some of the research that I did on like just finding out like how he worked, he did not like that part.
Yeah,
Everything else he was fine with. It's just the the messy part. He was like, I hated that part, but it was necessary. And then, he kind of chomped on some of it, but
yeah. He was a complex individual for sure.
yes.
I think with this story, I can't tell. The more I think about it, actually, you making me think a little bit. With this killer, I think he always felt okay with everything, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he felt like he was like, this is right. And I think the way I said it, the story too, is the character was very independent. I think if you want to think about it, we like our independence, but we need people. And in the story, I set it up that his parents kind of didn't really involve themselves in his life. They left him to kind of become the person he wants to become, and he
Right.
was kind of well off, and he just kind of did whatever he wanted that would keep him interested. But I don't necessarily know if that's like the best way. I mean, we all have ways to direct people, but I think people need people. And I think this
Right.
person just didn't have that. He was left to explore. And sometimes when you explore, maybe you don't have any kind of guidance. I don't know if that's the right word, or you just don't have any kind of foundation to go back on that's going to make you
Like the
feel,
morals that you
but
would
yeah, the
normally
morals.
learn.
Yeah, or just like if I'm do this, I'm gonna disappoint someone. But he didn't really have that kind of feeling. Like he felt like people always disappointed him, I guess.
Mhm.
And for that, he felt justified in some ways. I mean, there's so many ways to try to make yourself feel like what I'm doing is okay.
I kind of have a follow-up question on that. So, would you say with that character, it was more of a nature or nurture issue?
Uh, yeah, that's kind of that. Like I said, I like sociology, and I like this whole kind of like social norms and like what are we, and then you get into biology and psychology. But it was more of nurture. I think environment for this character, the killer, is he depended on his environment, and when the environment didn't go his way, then he would fall into bad ways, if you
Mhm.
will. Because I think in one part he was trying to become better, but it didn't work out, and he could always fall back onto his old things that would satisfy him. So it's kind of that environment for him. The environment was very important. It's like you have to love yourself to love others. I think is a big thing in my kind of work too. Is like you got to be comfortable in your own skin to be able to go outside your skin and be with others. And for him, I don't know if he really ever really truly loved himself like he needed to love. And I think that's kind of like what people need to do. It's like, yeah, we have struggles, we have things that hurt us, but at the same time, we still need to be okay with ourselves. So, but I mean, I think in an intellectual way, I think there is still this kind of biology behind our environment, right? So,
Yeah.
what makes us who we are is very complicated chemically within our bodies. So, it's only like you either get enhanced or maybe you get you become worse if the environment's not right. You know, we all have a breaking point, I guess you will. It's
Yeah.
interesting. What would be a breaking point for a serial killer? What I mean, I think they would probably have
Like
a
what
short
pushes
fuse.
them over the edge to like
Yeah,
make their first decision that they're like, I'm gonna do this.
yeah. And there is that I talk about that actually in this story. There is that first kill for this serial killer. So if
Right.
you haven't got to that part of the book, then
Oh
there is
yeah.
that first kill part. So he describes that. I mean, this serial killer is a talker. He likes to talk, right?
Yes.
And I think that's probably what he's trying to do. He wants to. It's that whole human interaction. He wants to interact with people. He wants them to say like, "Okay, I see your point, and I know what you're talking about." Even though what you're trying to get people to accept is crazy because we don't like in general society people don't like people to kill others. You know,
Right.
that kind of
He
freaks people out.
it's like a way for him to be seen,
Yep.
and but he also wants people to understand at the same time. Like, see me but understand why at the same
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, you got to see my point of view because I mean, the whole thing is he gets a name attached to him, like we do in society.
Mhm.
There's always this names, right? But he
Oh
doesn't like it
yeah.
because he's like, well, you're not really seeing me for what I'm doing. So let me tell
Right.
you what I'm doing, right?
Yeah. So like you're talking about like his serial killer name, right?
Yeah, the serial
Like
killer
the
name.
Green River Killer, or
Yeah,
something. Who I There's so many out there, I can't even remember how
yeah.
many.
I mean, the most famous one is Jack the Ripper. Everyone knows about Jack the Ripper because of
Yeah,
how he killed his victims, right?
right.
So there's always this like when a victim is found, it could be a place like the Green River, I guess. I would assume that's named after where the killings happen, but I guess it's
Yeah,
how the
it's
victim
he
is killed.
yeah, so the Green River Killer, the reason he got that name is because he would dump them in the Green River.
Yeah. So that makes sense.
Um, I forget where he operated out of, but I know it's in like the Northeast, somewhere
Yeah.
up there. Can you tell us a little bit about how you went about developing your plots and characters?
I've always been drawn to kind of the classic storytelling of like you have a character and you just learn about them and they're just kind of like it's kind of sappy, but it's like I really like some of those movies like the color purple or
I mean,
just
that's a
Joseph
good movie.
Conrad. Yeah, it's a great movie, but like Joseph Conrad, where you're just storytelling about a family and you're just getting into their lives. And friendship's always been important to me. Friends, I love friends, and I love that whole kind of like building that up. So, and there's a new city that these people are coming to,
Mhm.
and it's just like a city become alone is lonely when you first get there. So it's just like developing these friends would find each other. And when you find someone in your life and you spend time with them, then something becomes alive and that city becomes your city along with what they're going through. So for me, it was like I knew I had two guy friends because I've always had really good best friends who are guys. But
Mhm.
this is another tension part. I had to bring a woman in to the story because I think that adds more character to it. And when you have two guys and a woman, then of course there could be kind of a love triangle. So
Yeah,
for
some
me, I
tension
kind of
there.
wanted, yeah. So I that was part of the story, and I wanted to, and I had chapters at the beginning where I talked about their whole lives, where they came from, what made them who they are. And so I really like writing that. I've always been someone that when I have thoughts or feelings, I just want to find the right words to describe that, describe a city where someone lives, or describe going outside and how you feel that day. So I always try to kind of pepper that into my storytelling. And then I started off with the narration, and I didn't name the narrator on purpose. And I also didn't name the serial killer on purpose. So when you have the three friends, you know the names of the two friends, but you don't know the narrator's name until later in the book, and the serial killer. They introduce themselves later in the book. And I did that on purpose because I wanted to explore writing one of the chapters like in the second person, where you try to bring the reader in, and you're saying you're using the word you, and you're trying to draw them in, because Edgar Allan Poe did that in The Telltale Heart, where he's going back and forth the first person to kind of a second person, and it trying to draws the reader into the story. So I wanted to explore that. So I was doing that, but from a plot, it's always been about like this good versus bad, and the friends are just good people, and I really wanted to write these good people, but they're involved in something that's bigger than them, that's going to be a struggle for them. And one of the characters ultimately is like really involved. I mean, they all become involved, but one of the characters is really involved in this fourth character that I brought into it, which is the antagonist, and that's the serial killer, and just like get inside his mind and what he's doing and why he's doing it, and he's got this plan. And I think a lot of times serial killers have a plan, and they're really good at it, obviously, because they became famous, or not a good type of famous, but they became known to people in history. Right? Yeah, infamous.
Yeah.
So this guy comes in the story. So that was kind of just my thought process. But for what I found with writing is, if you just try to write for inspiration and you just try to improvise it, for me, it just doesn't work. Like I told you, I have to have an outline. Like I say, okay, this is my overall structure. This is where I want to go. I don't know the words yet, but I know the framework. And then I try to put all that stuff in between to build out the framework. That's just my process, because I used to think, yeah, you just got to be inspired. And I think that used to work for me, because I used to write poetry from here to there, and I just be inspired and I just go write some poetry. But
I think
with
that's
a novel,
a little different though. Like, because poetry gives you, it's shorter, and it gives you kind of like a freedom. Whereas a novel, it's like there needs to be some kind of structure almost.
Yeah, exactly. It's like running a marathon. Like, it's like if you run a marathon, it's like you got a long race ahead of you.
Right.
A book is like that too. And you're just kind of like going at it and saying, okay, I'm writing this chapter, and I'm putting these paragraphs together, and this is where I'm going, and I'm trying to build. And with a psychological thriller, you have to also think about, it's not like a drama. You have to kind of like make it kind of action and kind of going back and forth. And it's funny when you watch a movie, it's amazing how they make it so action and it's so fun to watch. But when you're writing, it's like, what I found is challenge is like, how do you make action into writing? So that was like something I had to kind of really work at, like going from this to this and this, and I always think about, is this going to engage the reader? I mean, I like what I'm writing, but are they going to like it? So it's kind of like attention, even as they're trying to write things.
Right. Okay.
Dark character profile.
The world is angry, but it's not done speaking. That is where we will pick up again next time, where we will go even deeper into the psychology of the world is angry. Until then, if you found this episode compelling, like it, follow or subscribe to Dark Character Profiler, leave a comment below, and share it with someone who isn't afraid to look darkness in the eye. See you soon.
Thank you for listening to Dark Character Profiler with Fulcrum. Listen every other Tuesday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Podcasts. Humanity was not meant to live this way. Society is left to the mercy of murderers and cutthroats. Hear Paige Zaplin Dam's epic tale brought to life in an audiobook.
For years, Slade had felt secure in the forest.
I am from simple, humble beginnings. I was raised in the Ironwood by an Ogress, an Anaral.
He saw immediately that she was beyond a healer's aid. Even a skilled witch could not help her recover from losing so much blood.
Mother? Slade thought he wanted revenge. Instead, he got redemption. A kingdom of ash and steam. The Ogress's Son. A dystopian neo-Dark Age fantasy. Narrated by Rich Fraser. Now available on iTunes and Audible.
I promise you I will find whoever did this and avenge you, Mother.